Planning a fishing trip shouldn't feel like a full-time job. With FishingBooker.com, you can find and book the perfect fishing trip within minutes. FishingBooker.com connects you with trusted fishing captains around the world. Booking is fast, easy, and secure, with access to verified customer reviews, loyalty rewards, and around-the-clock customer support. Everything you need to book with confidence is in one place. So head to FishingBooker.com and start planning your next fishing adventure today.
The world moves fast. Your workday, even faster. Pitching products, drafting reports, analyzing data. Microsoft 365 Copilot is your AI assistant for work. Built into Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and other Microsoft 365 apps you use. Helping you quickly write, analyze, create, and summarize. So you can cut through clutter and clear a path to your best work. Learn more at Microsoft.com/M365 Copilot.
It's one thing for me to drive into St. John's and look in the grocery store aisle and see that, it's all but empty in as for vegetables and fresh. But it's another thing to be down in Ron Contra somewhere, which is, down on the southern shore of Newfoundland and be in Fort Tow and these places and realize that, they're only getting things brought in by boat.
From a distance, Newfoundland looks severe. Rock, wind, long winters. A growing season that begins late and ends early. Stand here long enough and you understand why agriculture never dominated this place. And yet, just offshore, for centuries, there were fish in numbers beyond belief. Lobster in the shallows, seal on the ice, moose in regenerating forests, and caribou before them. This is a place where food can feel limitless and still uncertain. A place where abundance and austerity share the same shoreline.
Join Justin Townsend and the Harvesting Nature crew as they explore the world of cooking wild fish and game while sharing recipes, tips, tricks, and lessons learned from their pursuit of wild food. We sure hope you ate before the show, 'cause you're gonna leave hungry. This is the Wild Fish and Game Podcast.
I'm Justin Townsend.
And I'm Adam Merkelmans.
This is the Wild American Foodscapes. Each episode we ask, how has food shaped this place, and how has this place shaped food? Newfoundland is a place where biological abundance meets environmental restraint, and food is the negotiation between the two.
I's the boy that builds the boat, and I's the boy that sails her. I's the boy that catches the fish and takes them home to Lizer. Hip your partner Sally Tibbo, hip your partner Sally Brown. A fogo twilling at Borton's Harbour, all around the circle.
Long before cod became a global commodity, the Beothuk, the original Indigenous peoples of Newfoundland, lived within these margins. They moved seasonally between the interior and the coast, caribou inland, fish and seabirds along the shore. They stored what they could, and they worked within cycles they understood deeply. There are no Beothuk elders to interview. The last known Beothuk person died in 1829. Disease introduced by Europeans, displacement from coastal access, starvation, and senseless brutality erased the people within generations. Access to fish-rich coves, the same coves that would later anchor export economies, became contested ground. What we know now comes from archaeology and fragmentary records. We spoke with Mark Kurlansky, journalist and historian whose books have traced the global story of cod and salt, among other topics, about the geography that shaped early food systems here.
When the first Europeans went there, they wrote a little bit about it. But I mean, you have to look at Newfoundland. I mean, what is there? There's hopelessly short growing season, very little arable land. It's inevitable that their food comes from the sea. Always has. Beothuk were fishing people. Anybody who lives in Newfoundland is going to be a fishing person because that's what there is there.
Here, the sea shaped how people survived, not as an idea, but as a daily reality.
Well, it's interesting to look at I wrote a book about Clarence Birdseye and the history of frozen food. And Birdseye got his whole idea about fast freezing from living in Labrador, because in the Labrador winter you could freeze food as maybe you could in Toronto today, almost instantly. And so that was the birth of the concept of fast freezing. But they always had fast freezing in Newfoundland and Labrador. So, I mean, you can talk about drying, but in the Newfoundland winter, if you put out fish to dry, it would quickly freeze.
When Europeans arrived, preservation scaled outwards. Fish were salted, dried, stacked, and shipped to overseas markets rather than at a tribal scale. Abundance began moving offshore, economically as well as physically. Before we move into marine systems, we want to widen the lens, because Newfoundland food isn't only about cod. We spoke with Laurie McCarthy, founder of Food Culture Place, a writer, a cook, cultural documentarian, and teacher who grew up in a fishing family in a small outport.
I did grow up in Newfoundland. Like they say here, you're born and bred. I grew up in a little tiny town. There was maybe 200 people. My dad was a fisherman and a teacher, and mom was home with us. So I always think that really do shape, your living as it relates today. For some people, for sure, and it definitely did for me. But as a child, we're so unaware sometimes of like just how good we have it, and I think it matters like in no matter what context, but definitely in food. Like when we grow up. It was interesting because when I talked to mom, mom talks about growing up and how much they relied on wild food. They didn't have a lot of land, so they didn't do a lot of animals. And they bought all their meat outside of maybe a few chickens or something, or it was all wild.
Laurie describes growing up unaware of how much her diet was wild because it was simply normal. Moose, duck, fish, food from the land, and water. Today, she keeps freezers full, not out of nostalgia, but because the cost of living on this isolated island demands it.
The fact that I have a freezer with, I don't know, what if I had to replace the moose and with purchase meat, that's $2,000 of meat in my freezer. It's the only reason I have a generator is to keep that freezer going, right? So while people would argue it's, people have said to me one time before, I remember I was talking about snaring rabbits, right? It's part of life. We do it here. We've always done it here. It's not for fun. It's for food.
A full freezer here isn't a symbol. It's security. Electric generators are purchased to protect what's inside them. That is abundance contrasted with vulnerability. And historically, one of the animals most closely tied to household security in Newfoundland was seal. Seal requires more context. Seal populations in Atlantic Canada are currently large. Harp seals number in the millions. The hunt itself has existed for centuries for meat, oil, and the pelts. In 2009, the European Union banned the import of commercial seal products following intense animal rights campaigns. That market loss devastated pricing. What had been economically a viable harvest that simultaneously put food on the table became financially marginal. The ecological population did not collapse. The market did. We spoke to Jenn Shears, a journalist, hunter, and former communications advisor within Newfoundland and Labrador's provincial government, who has worked directly in conversations around wildlife management and public perception.
For so many years, it's been a topic that the politicians are fully aware is an important thing, culturally, environmentally, economically, but it's so risky politically that they stray away from it. And that's been to the detriment of Newfoundlanders. It's been to the detriment of northern communities. It's been to the detriment of seals themselves and to other fish stocks, because seals are now eating other things to make up for what they don't have anymore. So I went to Ottawa and gave the presentation, basically called them a bunch of spineless jellyfish and told them a backbone needs to be grown on this topic. And it turns out there are some politicians, if you call them that, it endears them to you and you to them. So I've been invited back a couple of times to different events and to kind of try to promote the seal products and the seal harvest and talk some sense into people. It's been really good. When the report came out, after I left that room, I had no doubt I impacted everyone in there from all parties, Liberal, Conservative, NDP. I don't think there was a Green representative there, but those three parties anyway. I had no doubt I swayed probably everyone in the room, because everyone from every party came up and telling me like, wow, I learned a lot. I'm going to look at the resources you talked about. My concern was that those people would be able to go back to their respective parties and have it, make a difference. When the report came out, I was pleasantly surprised. It basically covered my presentation like step by step, and everything that I had said and the other witnesses had said. But I don't really know that much action has followed from that. Typical government stuff, I guess. Anytime I feel I can kind of get the word out, get the messages out, like on this podcast right now, like I'm so grateful for the opportunity. I feel I should speak up because there's just so much unknown about it. And if you just see the propaganda and that's the only side you get, of course it looks awful. So just being able to impart that is really important to me, because I know firsthand that I've been able to sway people and, bring them around once they finally hear the truth.
Jenn has worked at the intersection of wildlife policy and public messaging. The seal hunt is often reduced to imagery, but the management conversation is more procedural than theatrical.
Even when that happened and the white coat hunt was banned, animal rights activists still, harped on it, pardon the pun, it's the harp seal that we hunt, saying that we were skinning seals alive. So it was barbaric and inhumane. And people in the industry knew that wasn't the case. So they thought that, rational talk and evidence and proving it would make a difference. But we know with these animal rights groups, that's not the case, because truth is ultimately not what they're after. They're after money, basically. So the industry themselves stepped up and said, we are not skinning seals alive, and we will prove it to you, and we will put measures in place to ensure that doesn't happen. So they hired veterinarians and scientists to develop a process to humanely dispatch of a seal. And through that process, the veterinarians and scientists came up with the 3-step process to humanely harvest seals. So step 1 is called strike, and strike is done with a high-powered rifle. Our typical rifle we would use would be like a 22-250 or a 223. 223, the ammunition's cheaper, so that's a popular one. 22-250 is a bit bigger and more expensive. But you shoot when you're on the boat out around the ice floes. We find the herd, so you shoot with the rifle. You aim for the head because it's an instant death, and also it does preserve the pelt and the meat and the oil that you're gonna render for it. The next step is you pull up to the ice, you jump out of the boat onto the ice, and you don't know what step you're taking, if it's going to be water underneath and you're going to, fall in, or you're going to stay on the ice. It's quite scary to be out there, but a lot of fun at the same time too. So step 2, you walk up to the seal, and it's called check. So what you're actually doing is you're feeling the skull, and the goal is that all aspects of the cranium are crushed, because if the shot crushed the entire cranium, the seal is very much unconscious. It's dead for sure, but in terms of this process, it's unconscious. If there's any part of the skull intact, though, you are required by law to use a tool called a hack-a-pick, which I guess is like a club, to hit the seal on the head to ensure that the entire cranium is crushed. So that's, again, to ensure that the seal is fully unconscious before you proceed to the next step. The step that's next, number 3, is bleed. So you actually have to sever under the flippers, the arteries, and wait a few minutes for the seal to bleed out. Again, to make sure the seal is totally unconscious or dead before you proceed to harvest the fur, the meat, and the oil.
The 3-step process Jenn describes is regulated. It is monitored. It is designed to meet humane standards. But policy does not exist in isolation. When the EU ban took effect, many coastal families lost meaningful seasonal income. Equipment went unused. Knowledge passed less frequently between generations. For many, the loss was economic. For others, it was cultural. Seal is also food.
Seal is a very rich meat. It's high in metals and strong nutrients, omega-3s, and the oils. So now you can also, you always could, I guess, but when you render the oil, you can make omega-3 capsules out of it for humans and pets as well. There's pet food oil that comes out of it. At a time and in a place where it's so hard sometimes to get real nutrient-rich foods, it kind of ticks all the boxes. And to keep some fat on your bones too, like the oils and the fats that come with it. It's a dark, rich meat. It's really, really good and really useful for the type of environment we live in with, lack of sunlight sometimes and all that. Flippers are typically the part that would be traditionally eaten, because whether the seal is young or old, it has flippers. So you can make like a typical bake out of it, just put it with some water, onion soup mix and make a stew almost like with carrots and turnip and potato. Those are the three main staple vegetables in Newfoundland. That's what our soil can grow. And and some people will put a pastry over it as well. So you bake it in like a roaster and it comes out well. I will say it is a bit of a more fishy taste than, say, like the seal loins, which are incredible. But flippers, again, are more traditional because where the seals that were hunted were typically young, the flipper is what you would get. Like the backstrap and stuff wasn't really developed enough to provide a big meal for a family. So you had that. And the flipper is basically, I guess, just like the shoulder. So all the meat associated with that. So you can do that. With the loins, though, it's so much milder. And I guess the biggest compliment that the newer generation could say to seal is when you taste it, that it doesn't taste like seal. And I would say the loins really don't taste like seal. There's a unique taste to it, but it's not like the fishy. It is, again, rich and dark, beautiful cut of meat. And you can put like a little coating on it and make seal nuggets and stuff out of it. You can put it into pasta. I went to a sealing event a few years ago at Mallard Cottage. Todd Perrin is a chef there, and he brought in other chefs, or Todd was the chef there. He brought in other chefs too, and it was like a 7-course meal, and each course had something seal. Even the dessert, it was like a chocolate thing with dried seal shavings on it. It was incredible and really eye-opening. And I just wish with the number of seals we have, we could literally cure world hunger if we were able to harvest it properly and export it properly and we didn't have those barriers in place.
Eating seal is not a spectacle here, and as part of a system. The deeper tension lies here. When external markets collapse a harvest, ecological management remains as a necessity, even when handcuffed by restrictive laws. Seal populations remain high, predator-prey dynamics continue, participation declines. Abundance persists, livelihood shifts, and without ample cod populations, seals are moving towards other fish for sustenance. You have to ask, what effect will this have on Newfoundland's fisheries and more broadly, ocean health? We asked Lori what wild food still means in daily life.
The foods from our Indigenous peoples here are also still very much play a big role. Like, yes, my grandfather hunted turs, but we still hunt turs today. And turs are the seabird known as a murre. We call them turs here. But that was done from as long as there were people here, right? They ate from the sea, they ate from the land. A large portion of Newfoundland still eats from the sea and the land. So it's definitely, a place that still holds to the past, but it brought food into the present and still holds a very tangible piece of our culture, but it also holds the intangible, that humanness that, I speak to about the roles that it plays in community and the role that it plays in bringing people together. It's not just eating it, it's not just out of necessity in terms of sustenance. It plays such a larger role, in bringing people together. Emotional sustenance, that's excellent.
She speaks about emotional sustenance, not simply protein, but continuity.
Raise the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an Enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more. Start converting your B2B audience today. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a free $250 credit for the next one. Get started today at linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
Zootopia 2 has come home to Disney+.
Let's go!
Get ready for a new case.
We're the greatest partners of all time!
New friends.
Gary the Snake.
And your last name?
The Snake.
Dream Team. New habitats.
Zootopia has a secret reptile population.
You can watch the record-breaking phenomenon at home. Zootopia 2, now available on Disney+, rated PG. And right now you can get Disney Plus and Hulu for just $4.99 a month for 3 months with a special limited time offer. Ends March 24th. After 3 months, plan auto renews at $12.99 a month. Terms apply.
Atlantic cod are not elegant fish. Broad-headed, heavy-bodied, pale green to brown across the back, fading to white below. A barbel hanging from the chin like a small tassel. 3 dorsal fins, a wide mouth built for swallowing crustaceans and smaller fish. They grow large, historically very large. They move in schools dense enough that a fisherman once described lowering baskets overboard and lifting them full. Stories circulate still about the Grand Banks, where the surface seemed to tremble with cod, when it felt possible, in exaggeration and awe, to walk across their backs. Cod became beloved not because of their flavor alone, though the flesh is firm, white, mild, versatile, but because it was reliable, it dried well, it salted well, and it could travel. We spoke with Mark about how cod's biology met global demand.
There was a huge demand for fish, and fresh fish was something that was only experienced if you lived by a coast. You know, Charlemagne had rushed inland to him, but this fish that arrived preserved, already shipped and ready for more shipping, became a basic commodity of food all over Europe. And cod was, first of all, cod, because of its low fat and it's the way the meat is structured and everything, is ideal for drying and salting. Because they found these huge stocks in North America, there was a huge supply of it. It became the dominant fish. Well, salting was the most effective way of preserving the fish for shipping. There was also, you could just dry it, which Scandinavians did a lot. This was the way, and remained the way, for preserving fish and shipping fish until refrigeration was invented.
Scale changed the perception. Large catches can mean abundance, or it can simply mean increasing efficiency. We asked Mark about that illusion.
It became this political thing. I mean, Newfoundland was making a lot of money, and the government was pleased to sponsor it because it was making everybody happy. And, stock assessment is a tricky business, but for the time being, it does appear that there are significant lobster stocks, despite the amount that is being caught. But it's always, I always say, just look at Newfoundland and the Grand Banks. It's always a mistake to judge fish stocks by the size of catches.
When the cod moratorium came in 1992, approximately 50,000 people were directly or indirectly affected. It was the largest industrial closure in Canadian history. The abundance that had defined this place receded, and people began to leave the island for work and easier lives elsewhere.
It definitely influenced how I live today, but it didn't come around till after. I was of the generation, the cod fishery, the collapse. Dad was a fisherman at the time, so it really hit me hard. And again, at the time, you remember it, but you never had enough context to really understand how devastating it was, right? So during that time, my uncles and grandfather, it was a huge end of an era. And I know that this has been talked about so many times, like the collapse of the cod fishery, but not always is it related to or talked about in context of how it really affected a human and the family. And, it's so broad. And during that time, we were told as young people to leave here. And we were told that because it was so dear to our hearts that they wanted better for us because they were in hard times, right? And so that's the only reason it was said, because if you ask like a Newfoundlander now, you'd be hard pressed to find one that, if they're living away, they're often living away to come back. And they say that, you always know a Newfoundlander in heaven because they're the only ones that wants to come home. So, that way of living came back around to me a long time after, but it was certainly because we were taught that there was nothing here. There was nothing here left for you. So go off and live somewhere else and find a better life.
Migration followed. Alberta, British Columbia. Outports thinned, but the food system did not vanish. Crab fisheries expanded, and lobster grew in economic importance. Some argue crustaceans flourished in cod's absence, while others argue that they were simply underharvested before. Either way, the pivot demonstrates something very fundamental. Food here has always operated between abundance and limit. When the balance shifts through industry or policy or ecology, the food shifts with it.
Well, we saw it, in COVID, right? What happened? There was no crisis for me personally in my food supply. When people joke about them going to Lori's if anything ever happens, bottling meat, right? And people don't bottle meat everywhere. We always did. So when we didn't have freezers full of meat, or when the freezers were full, the meat, the fish, the whelks, the mussels, everything was bottled.
Preservation skills are now officially listed as crafts at risk in Newfoundland and Labrador. But in kitchens, they continue. Wild tea from backyard plants, bottled fish, fermented greens, even root cellars.
I keep a kitchen diary, and I keep it for the kids. And I pretty much writing it every day, had this for supper today, made this bread, did this whatever, fermenting this, neighbor came over with, 2 ducks today. And so I believe we should document everything. Just write it down. We think that, not that our lives need to be so important before we write this stuff down, but we look at, we have very little written information about, our Indigenous people here and how any of that was recorded in terms of their what they were harvesting, say, from the wild, for instance, right? But, in my grandmother's time, I would find it fascinating today to know, when they put seeds in the ground and and it was all around such deep folklore, the red sky and the first February.
Resilience here looks less like reinvention and more like continuity under pressure. Abundance remains. Just look at how moose have been filling pantries and freezers in Newfoundland in the last decades. But so does restraint. This is a people that has been burned before. So if you were to visit this island, how would you eat sustainably there? Well, just know if you come to Newfoundland, you can eat well. You can eat local cod in season, lobster from small boat harvesters, moose where legal and properly tagged, seal in communities that still cook it. You can book a residency with someone like Lori and sit on a beach learning why preservation matters. You can fish with licensed operators, visit smaller communities, support independent restaurants sourcing locally. Sustainable visitation here means respecting seasonality, asking where food comes from, understanding that this is a working coastline, not a performance, and most important of all, listening.
Now what I offer here, I still have my residencies where people come for 3 days, with full immersion into, wild game and wild foods and traditional skills. And I have fishermen who will come and spend the day or take us out fishing. And I have, local people who will come and hunters or, my uncle who will come and speak to someone about, the hunting here. So I try to still very much involve local people and to gather those so people understand that wild food is not like a new thing here, or even, making bread or, salt and fish and all those traditional things. It's still very much living culture.
Food shaped Newfoundland in a culture of harvest, preservation, and outward trade. And this landscape, through winter, collapse, and constraint, reshaped its food into a living record of adaptation, caution, and care.
If abundance returns again in new forms, will restraint keep pace with it?
Out on the stormy
on the banks of Newfoundland.